Radha Shivasri Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Ishopanishad Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi Haribol. So we're going to tonight, first of all, we recite the 18 mantras of the Ishopanishad, and then we're going to go over the purport of the first mantra very carefully, as we did in the Invocation mantra, so that we can have a clear understanding of the major points in the purport. So first we're going to recite the Ishopanishad. Om Purnam Ada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate Ishavaishyam Idam Sarvam Jatkinja Jagatyam Jagat Tena Taktena Bunjitaha Magritaha Kisasvidanam Kurvani Vahakarmani Jajiva Chekshatam Samaha Evam Tvayi Nanyatetostina Karma Dipyate Nare Asurya Namate Loka Andena Tamasavritaha Tamste Pritya Bigachanti Yeke Chatma Hano Janaha Anijadika Manaso Javiyo Nena Devam Apravam Pravamasat Tadavato Jnana Teti Tistat Tasmina Pumatavisvadadati Tadechati Tadnechati Tadure Tadvantike Tadantarasya Sarvasya Tadusarvasya Bayataha. Yes, Anijadika Manaso Javiyo. I'm sorry. Yastu Sarvani Bhutani Atmani Evanupashyati Sarvabhute Sachatmanam Tatuna Vijugupsate Yasmin Sarvani Bhutani Atmeva Bhut Vijanataha Tatrako Mahakaha Sukha Ekatvam Anupasyataha Sa Prayagachchukamakayam Avrinam Asnaviram Sudam Apapabivanam Kavir Manisi Paribu Swayambhu Yata Tat Yatoritan Vyadadaj Chasvatipyaha Samabhyaha Antam Tamaha Pravisanti Ye Vidyam Upasyate Tato Bhuya Ivate Tamu Yayu Vidyayam Rataha Anyad Evahur Vidyaya Anyad Ahur Avidyaya Iti Susruma Dhiranam Yenastad Vichachakside Vidyam Cha Yas Yastad Velobayam Saha Avidyaya Militam Tirva Vidyayam Ritamasnute Antam Tamaha Pravisanti Ye Sambhutim Upasyate Tato Bhuya Ivate Tamu Yayu Sambhutam Rataha Anyad Evahur Sambhavat Anyad Ahur Sambhavat Iti Susrumadiranam Yenastad Vichachakshire Sambhutim Cha Vinasam Cha Yastad Velobayam Saha Avidyaya Vinasena Militum Tirtva Vidyayam Ritam Sambhutam Ritam Asnute Hiranmayana Patrena Satyasya Bhitam Mukam Tatvam Pusam Apavrinu Satyadharma Yajistaye Pusaneka Seyama Surya Prajapatya Vihuha Rasmin Samaha Tejo Yatte Rupam Kayanatamam Tate Pasyami Yo Savaso Purushaha Sohamasmi Vayuranilam Amritam Matedam Basmantam Sariram Om Kratos Smara Kritam Smara Kratos Smara Kritam Smara Om Agne Naya Supatara Eswan Viswani Deva Vayunani Divan Yo Dashmaz Juhurana Mino Buyustam Tema Nama Uktim Vedama Om Tat Sat. So those are the mantras of the Ishopanishad, and we will read the English translations, and then we'll go on to the first mantra purport. So the Invocation mantra of the Ishopanishad says in English, the personality of Godhead is perfect and complete, and because he is perfectly complete, or completely perfect, all emanations from him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as complete wholes. Whatever is produced of the complete whole is also complete in itself. Because he is the complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from him, he remains a complete balance. Shishirada Nilamadava Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Haribol. Then the first mantra translation says, everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. So now, to analyze the purport of this amazing verse, we'll do that right now. And it says, the Vedic knowledge is infallible because it comes down through the perfect disciplic succession of spiritual masters, beginning with the Lord himself. Since he spoke the first word of Vedic knowledge, he meaning Krishna, the source of this knowledge is transcendental. The words spoken by the Lord are called apaurushaya, which indicates that they are not delivered by any mundane person. So the first point made here is that Vedic knowledge is infallible. Infallible means there's no mistake. So that is accepted. Why? Because the Vedic knowledge was written down by Vyasadeva, who's the literary incarnation of Krishna. So therefore, basically, it's Krishna himself. And everything that comes from Krishna is infallible, meaning there cannot be any mistake in it. Now, most people would not believe that, but if you actually hear and read the Vedic literature, especially the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, you will see it's perfect and complete and infallible. Every statement in it is factual and cannot be debunked. So that's the first point. And the second point is, it comes down through the perfect disciplic succession of spiritual masters, beginning with the Lord himself. Yes, because Krishna himself instructed Brahma. Brahma instructed his disciple, Narada. Narada instructed his disciple, Vyasadeva. And Vyasadeva instructed his disciples, and they kept the Vedic knowledge pure and made sure that it's come down till today, unalterated. Okay, so, and this Ishopanishad is part of the original four Vedas. It's part of the Yajur Veda, and it is the best of the 108 Upanishads. Okay, so since Krishna spoke the first word of Vedic knowledge, the source of this knowledge is transcendental. The words spoken by the Lord are called apaurushaya, which indicates that they are not delivered by any mundane person. A mundane person who lives in the material world has four defects. That means all of us, the living entities, we have four defects. One, we are certain to commit mistakes. Two, we are subject to illusion. Three, we have a propensity to cheat others. And four, our senses are imperfect. Every human being has these four defects. Then it says, no one with these four imperfections or defects can deliver perfect knowledge. The Vedas are not produced by such an imperfect creature. Vedic knowledge was originally imparted by the Lord into the heart of Brahma, the first created living being, and Brahma in his turn disseminated this knowledge to his sons and disciples, who have handed it down through history. Okay, so the four fundamental defects disqualify any of us from being able to produce perfect literature or perfect philosophy. because we have these four defects. However, even though we have these four defects, if we listen attentively and reverently, the original Vedic knowledge spoken by Krishna to Brahma, etc., then even though we have these defects, if we simply repeat that knowledge correctly, we have perfect knowledge, even with our defects. If we deviate by changing things, adding things, etc., then it's not perfect. But if we simply repeat correctly, therefore, traditionally, the Vedic knowledge was always transmitted from a guru to a shishya, or a disciple, and the disciple would memorize the mantras. Just like this Ishopanishad only has 18 verses, but those 18 verses encompass the entire Vedic knowledge. That's how powerful this little book is, and that's why it's considered the best of all the Upanishads. If you study only this book, you will attain all the knowledge of the Vedas. So that's why Vedic knowledge and Vedic texts are amazing, but you have to hear it, not only read it, but you have to hear it spoken by genuine devotees to really understand the full depth and profundity of the knowledge. Do you want a blessing for the baby? You want a blessing for the baby? Okay, he's going to make an offering right now, right after that. You have to wait a few minutes. Okay. So you're going to give a blessing to the baby after the offering, okay? Since the Lord is Purnam, all perfect, there is no possibility of his being subjected to the laws of material nature, which, by the way, he controls. However, both the living entities and inanimate objects are controlled by the laws of nature and ultimately by the Lord's potency. This Ishopanishad is part of the Yajurveda, and consequently it contains information concerning the proprietorship of all things existing within the universe. Now, that is extremely important, because who is the owner of this world, of this body that we have, and the senses that we have? Actually, everything belongs to Krishna, because everything is made of Krishna's energy. Even our soul is a part and parcel of Krishna. Mamayavamsa Jivaloka Jivabhuta Sanatana. The 15th chapter, 7th verse of Bhagavad Gita says that the individual soul, or the Atma, or Jivatma, is part and parcel of Krishna. It has come from Krishna, just like in a fire there are sparks. Now the sparks are fire. As long as they stay close to the fire, they remain light. If they fall away from the fire onto, let's say, a river, or then they'll be extinguished. If they fall on the land, they may or may not continue to burn. If they fall on dry leaves, they will burn. So we are like spiritual sparks of Krishna, just like sparks in a fire. And if we stay close to Krishna, then our full glory is manifested. If we separate ourselves from Krishna, it's like a person who has a hand that's been cut off. It looks like a hand, but it doesn't function like a hand anymore. As long as the hand is connected to the body, it functions. So if we separate ourselves from God or Krishna, we no longer are functioning correctly, and we become trapped in a cycle of birth and death. Janma mityu jaravya di dukkadosana darshanam, as it says in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Every living entity is experiencing janma mrityu, birth, death, janma mrityu jara vyadi, jara, old age, and birth, death, old age, and disease. And these things are dosas. They are very bad things and completely unnecessary. It's only because we separate ourselves from Krishna that we experience these things. And we are like criminals that have walked away voluntarily from Krishna by misusing our limited independence, and therefore we get covered by a material body that's always changing and different from us. Our soul is eternal, the body is temporary, and the body is changing all the time. It goes from a little sperm that connects with an ovum and eventually develops a little pea-like form with 9 holes. Eventually those 9 holes become 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 2 eyes, a mouth, an anus, and a genital. And then it becomes a little fetus, and then eventually a fetus grows and it's pushed out as a little baby, just like you have a little baby right now, right? And then the baby will start growing, and it'll become 6 and 12 and 18 and 28 and eventually middle age and eventually old age and die. At every stage the body changes. So you cannot say that I am this body, but you can say that I'm the witness of the changes of the body. Because the body has consciousness, and that consciousness is coming from the soul. As soon as the soul leaves the body is dead meat. It doesn't have consciousness anymore. And no one can bring it back, because it's not, that consciousness is not made by chemicals or matter. It's spiritual existence of the soul that is manifested by consciousness. So these things are misunderstood by almost 99% of the population of the world. And because of that, people suffer unnecessarily old age, disease, and death. So Ishopanishad is saying here that there are laws of nature. Laws of nature are synonymous with laws of God, which is synonymous with Dharma. Now, what is Dharma? Dharma are prescribed occupational duties that every human being should perform. And when people become adharmic, meaning they don't follow these occupational duties, they suffer. And if they follow these occupational duties, they are relatively free of all suffering, whether it's mental or physical, and they're peaceful, and they are close to God by practicing bhakti yoga or devotional service. As it says, Mam chayovi bicharina bhakti yogena sevate sagunam samatityaitam brahmabhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman, or a spiritual level. So if we engage in bhakti or devotional service, we are in direct connection, we are directly connected to Krishna or God, and Krishna personally takes interest in us and protects us. He promises that. He says, Sarvadharmam prityaja mamekam saranam vraja ham tvam sarvapapebhyo mokshisyami mahasuchaha. 18th chapter, 66th verse. He says, hey Arjuna, just give up all your fabricated dharmas and surrender unto me. And I promise you that I will protect you from all sinful reactions or from all karma, and you have no reason to hesitate, doubt, or fear, and you will come back to me. So when we take an interest in Krishna, we hear regularly Bhagavad Gita spoken by genuine devotees, and we ask questions. Tad vidi paripatena paripasnena sevaya upateksyami te jnanam jnaninas tatvadarshanaha. Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter, 34th verse, says that there are three ways to approach a bona fide guru. By pranipat, being submissive, pariprasnena, asking significant questions, and sevaya, offering seva. And then that creates a friendly atmosphere between shishya and guru, and then when shishya or the disciple asks questions, guru will answer them fully. So in that way, we make tangible spiritual progress by regularly hearing Bhagavad Gita spoken by genuine devotees, asking questions, and listening attentively and reverently, and then gradually our faith in Krishna increases, our determination to actually engage in practical devotional service becomes a reality, and at that point, our life changes. We become peaceful. We feel the protection of Krishna. Krishna reveals himself to the devotee and gives the devotee knowledge by which he comes closer and closer to Krishna, and we become happy because we are protected by the mercy of the Lord. So, Ishopanishad is saying here that the Lord's proprietorship over everything within the universe is confirmed in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, 4th and 5th verse. So the concept of proprietorship is very important. If we think I am the proprietor, then we become subject to karma. Everything we do thinking that I am the proprietor, I am the dominator, I am the enjoyer of material facilities, and I can also dominate people. All these are false concepts, and they put us in the realm of karma, getting reactive, reactions to our actions that bind us to the cycle of birth and death. But when we understand that Krishna is the actual proprietor, even of this body, of our senses, the mind, the intelligence, everything in existence, both material and spiritual, then we have the responsibility of learning how to use everything properly in Krishna's service. From that point on, we are no longer engaged in performing any karma, because all the results of our work go to pleasing Krishna under the instructions of bona fide guru and gurus, Shiksha and Diksha gurus. So it says here that the Lord's proprietorship over everything within the universe is confirmed in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verses 4 and 5. So verse 4 says that Bhumir apo nalo vayu kam mano buddhireva cha hankara ityam me bina pakritirastata. Krishna says, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, these are my apara prakriti, inferior spiritual energies. And then he says, apariyamitastvanyam pakriti vidime param, jiva bhutam mahabaho yayidam daryate chagat. In the 7th chapter, 5th verse, he says that besides the mahabhutas, the 5 great elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and the subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego, there is a superior nature. So those 8 are apara prakriti, inferior spiritual energy, and there's a superior spiritual energy, which is all the living entities, the jiva atmas like you and me. We are part of Krishna's superior spiritual energy because we have an eternal soul. And he says, there is another superior energy of mind which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. So if we exploit the resources of material nature, we become entangled in the laws of karma, and we must go through the process of birth and death. and rebirth again. If we use those resources in the service of Krishna, that is called akarma. That is action. Karma means action, so action without any reaction, because we're only working to please Krishna, not to please ourselves. But if we please Krishna, we will also be pleased, because we become free of the laws of material nature, birth, death, old age, and disease. We become free of illusory efforts to dominate nature and people and exploit them for our own personal pleasure. So it is important to understand who is the actual proprietor. And Krishna is the proprietor of everything, both material and spiritual, both the para and apara prakritis. Prakriti means what is controlled, and apara prakriti is the inferior spiritual energy, and the para prakriti is the superior spiritual energy. Now, what's the difference, if there is a difference, between inferior spiritual energy and superior spiritual energy? Well, the inferior spiritual energy, or the material energy, is eternal, but it is not always manifest. It goes through two stages called avyakta and vyakta. Avyakta means unmanifest, and vyakta means manifest. So what is the unmanifest state of material nature? It is wound up into the transcendental body of Mahavishnu, and therefore you can't see it, but it's existing potentially as energy. Just like Einstein, his famous formula E equals mc squared. In other words, it's saying that energy can be transformed into matter, and matter can be transformed back into energy. Well, that is the idea of vyakta and avyakta, or manifest and unmanifest material energy. Although it's material, it's still eternal, because even in its unmanifest state as energy, it's still existing. But there is no time element pushing it, and there's no modes of material nature pushing it to make different bodies and different things in the material world. So everything comes to an absolute rest, waiting for the next material creation. Okay, so then it says, the elements of nature, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, all belong to the Lord's inferior material energy, apara prakriti, whereas the living being, the organic energy, is his superior energy, or Krishna's superior energy, para prakriti. Both of these prakritis, or energies, are emanations from the Lord, and ultimately he is the controller of everything that exists. There is nothing in the universe that does not belong either to the para or the apara prakriti. Therefore, everything is the property of the Supreme Being. Okay, so if everything's the property of Krishna, then everything should be used in Krishna's service. And when we understand this, we actually become liberated even in this world. Iha yasya harir dasya karmana manasajira akilasvapyavastasu jivan mukta sa uchyate. This is a verse from the Vedic scriptures, and it says that when one uses all assets of this body, the mind, the intelligence, the gross senses, the body, everything in the service of the Lord, then we become jivan mukta, a liberated soul, even in this world, even though we're still entrapped in a material body. We become a liberated soul. So liberation is not when you die you go to Swarga. That is not liberation. It looks like, that may look like liberation, but it's temporary, it's not eternal. Liberation is when we return back to Godhead, back to the spiritual world, which has two major parts, Vaikuntha and Goloka, in our eternal spiritual body that never deteriorates, and then we engage in transcendental pastimes with Krishna and his devotees. So the the and we are just going back to where we came from. We have fallen down from the spiritual world. Therefore, we have a right to go back if we correct our crooked mentality of wanting to be a dominator and enjoyer of material world and people. When we want to give joy and service to Krishna, which is the opposite of the crooked and perverted mentality of wanting to selfishly self-indulge, then we become liberated in this world, because all our actions then will be directed toward pleasing Krishna. Both of these prakritis or energies are emanations from the Lord, and ultimately He is the controller of everything that exists. There is nothing in the universe that does not belong either to the para or the apara prakriti. Therefore, everything is the property of the Supreme Being. So prakriti means energy, or what is being controlled. Krishna is controller of all energies. And there's superior spiritual energy and inferior spiritual energy. They're both spiritual because they're both eternal, but the material energy is bewildering because sometimes it disappears. So it's harder to understand the material energy than it is to understand the spiritual energy, which is always manifest. But one must be purified of lust, anger, greed, envy, madness, and illusion, and be engaged in devotional service with a clear understanding of our relationship with Krishna in order to see the spiritual world, and in order to go there. As long as the lust, anger, greed, or kama, krodha, and kama, krodha, let's see, greed means lobha, yeah. Kama, krodha, lobha, and matsarya, and moha, and anyway, those 6 types of negative emotions that we have keep us in the material world, as well as being subject to satya, rajas, and tamas influences. Although the satya influence is very positive for beginning to develop knowledge of Krishna, but the false ego in sattva, the stage of sattva, will keep us still in the material world, because we think that we have achieved something very wonderful by developing knowledge, developing self-control, but we're still attached to dominating things in the material world. But when we go to the Suddha Sattva stage, purified goodness, where our only desire is to please Krishna, at that point we are actually liberated, because we're no longer committing any more karmic actions. All our actions are delivered to pleasing Krishna. Okay, so because the Supreme Being, the Absolute Personality of Godhead, is the complete person, He has complete and perfect intelligence to adjust everything by means of His different potencies. The Supreme Being is often compared to a fire, and everything organic and inorganic is compared to the heat and light of that fire. Just as fire distributes energy in the form of heat and light, the Lord displays His energy in different ways. He thus remains the ultimate controller, sustainer, and dictator of everything. He is the possessor of all potencies, the knower of everything, and a benefactor of everyone. He is full of inconceivable opulence, power, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. So this is what differentiates Krishna from all other jivas, or living entities. He possesses in full these 6 opulences, or vibhutis. He has all knowledge, all power, all beauty, all fame, all renunciation, like that, and all wealth. So therefore, no one can be equal or greater than Krishna. Everyone is inferior, is subordinate to him. But people have, as jivatmas, we are part and parcel of Krishna. We have partially some of these 6 qualities, but Krishna has them in full, and no one can be equal to him because of that. So therefore, when we accept our subordinate, dependent position to God, we become actually free of the false ego. The false ego is explained in Bhagavad Gita. In the beginning of the 3rd chapter, there's a very nice verse that says, Prakriti, 1 second, let's just find the verse. Third chapter, verse 29 says, Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasaha. 1 second, yeah. Ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. The spirit soul, or the jiva, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the 3 modes of material nature. Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasaha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. So this is the hallmark of the false ego. We think that we are independent. We think that we are the controller of some part of material nature and even some people, and that we can exploit them for our own selfish pleasure. So this puts us in a position of being constantly in the cycle of birth and death and not being able to free ourselves because of these misconceptions. So the enemy is not the devil. The enemy is misconceptions, false knowledge, false ideas that enter into our mind and define who we are and define the activities that we do. So therefore, the material world is a very highly competitive place because everyone is competing to dominate. You see this in the corporate culture. Although people are working for the same company, but still, in the underbelly of that corporate culture, they're competing with each other also. This is what led to the fall down of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was supposed to be a communist state where the people are the owners. But in order to transform from a monarchy or that Russia was before communism to a pure communist state, there's an interval where there's the transformation. Well, they never got out of the transformation. And in that interval, although everyone is supposed to be equal in a communist state, there was constant rivalry to become the head of the state. And so we see Stalin, he killed Trotsky, and he killed so many people to make sure that he would be the leader. And before him, Lenin also, he killed the Tsar and other people. So ultimately, that pure communism was never achieved, and the Soviet Union fell apart. Okay, so this competition is due to the false ego, and that false ego dictates that, as this verse says, Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasaha. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the 3 modes of nature. So the 3 modes of nature, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Most people in the world today are under the control of rajas and tamas, lust and greed. And whenever there's lust that becomes frustrated, it turns into krodha, or anger. Now, this is why there's so much competition, strife, wars, violence, anger, envy, and all these things. Because of the influence of principally the influence of these two modes, rajas and tamas. So if you want to understand this more in depth, you have to read the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that explains in depth the influence of these three modes on living entities. We are all being forced by these three modes to do things. We think we're acting individually, but actually we're being forced to do things. Like, for example, you eat, you're forced to go to the bathroom. You work, you're forced to eventually sleep. You sleep, you're forced to wake up and work again. And you're forced to blink your eyes. You're forced to do everything by the action of these modes. So in order to be a liberated person, you have to rise above the influence of sattva, rajas, and tamas. Now, if we want to be progressive spiritually, at least you have to bring a person from tamas to rajas to sattva guna. In sattva guna, they're able to begin to understand spiritual knowledge. But when the sattva guna is transformed into suddha sattva, then transcendental goodness, then one actually can understand. Even in sattva guna, there's admixture of sattva and rajas and tamas. So therefore, sattva. So these modes are fluctuating in a 24-hour period. While we're sleeping, it's tamasic mood. When we wake up, it becomes rajasic mood. And then through the day, maybe we might go to a church or a temple, and there'll be a little bit of sattvic behavior. And then again, while all the time we're working, it's mainly rajasic and tamasic behavior. So we see, unless we are trained in principles of Krishna consciousness, we will never be able to get out of the influence of these three modes of material nature. And that's why people are unhappy, frustrated, they get into arguments, there's violence, there's cheating, there's lying, all these things, because of the influence of these modes. However, if one is fortunate enough to have the association of a genuine devotee or genuine devotees who are themselves following the rules and regulations of what you call sadachar, proper good behavior, then one can make tangible spiritual progress in their association. So the number one decision we have to make is decide to associate with genuine sadhus. Because tell me who your friends are, I can tell you who you are. So if we associate with rajasic and tamasic people, we become like them. If we associate with sattvic people, then we become influenced for progressive spiritual advancement. Now, what determines progressive spiritual advancement? It's regulation of activity. So, therefore, the eating, the sleeping, and mating, the defending has to be done according to the principles of spiritual instructions given by Krishna. Every living entity is eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Now, these functions that we perform, if they're done according to the Vedic instructions, then we become regulated. Most of the people in this world are unregulated in their eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And therefore, their lives are mostly chaotic and quixotic, as they say. They just act out of whims rather than acting out of duty. And because of that, they become entangled in karmic reactions. So, in the association of genuine sadhus, one learns to go to sleep early, wake up early in the Brahma Muhurta, and to chant mantras like the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and attend Mangalarti and Tulsi Arti, and hear pravachan or the class, and ask questions, and then have some prasadam, and then you go home and go to work, and you have been, in a sense, purified by the spiritual activities and the spiritual food and the spiritual mantra and the spiritual discussions in the class. So unless we submit ourselves to this type of life, we just get stuck by the laws of karma, and we die in ignorance and have to take birth again and start all over. And there's no guarantee that we'll get a human body in the next life. So here it says that one should therefore be intelligent enough to know that except for the Lord, or Lord Krishna, no one is a proprietor of anything. One should accept only those things that are set aside by the Lord as his or her quota. The cow, for instance, gives milk, but she does not drink that milk. She eats grass and straw, and her milk is designated as food for human beings. Of course, the cow will feed its calf, but that's only a short period, maybe 3 or 4 months, and even when the calf drinks the milk, the calf doesn't drink all the milk. If the cow is taken care of and is healthy and is giving proper feed, there's always more milk than the calf can drink. And then when the calf is weaned off of drinking the mother's milk, there's plenty of milk. So this is given by Krishna. And why is milk so important? Because when we drink milk from cows that are protected as what you can say is the dairies that are ahimsa dairies, like our dairy, we don't kill the bulls, we don't kill the cows, and we treat them very, very nicely. Then they give plenty of milk. They're very affectionate, very friendly, and by drinking that milk, our intelligence is definitely improved, and we begin to understand higher order spiritual precepts. So it says here that such is the arrangement of the Lord. Yes, so that the cow just eats straw and grass, and she gives milk. It's a miraculous process. Such is the arrangement of the Lord. Thus we should be satisfied with those things the Lord has set aside for us, and we should always consider to whom those things we possess actually belong. Well, Krishna has set aside for all of us, not only human beings, also the elephants and the insects and the birds and the bees and the fish and all living creatures, the mammals, is set aside for everyone their minimum quota to keep body and soul together. That is, whether you work or you don't work, if you have a righteous life based on Vedic Dharma, there will always be your minimum needs easily attained. So that's why in the Introductory Mantra it says that Krishna is perfect and complete, and everything that comes from Krishna, like the material energy or the jivas, you and me, are perfect and complete also. And then the first mantra says that Krishna has set aside for all living entities their minimum quota for maintenance of the body and soul together. So it doesn't mean we should become lazy and just say, well, Krishna will feed me. I'll just keep my mouth open and the food will just go there. No, but if we have faith in God, then by simply working honestly, we will always be able to maintain our life, our family, or whatever. And as long as we continue to this hearing and chanting, hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, chanting the holy names of Krishna, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And the mantra says, my dear Lord, my dear Radharani, and my dear Krishna, please protect me so I can always remain your servant. That's the meaning of the mantra. So if we continue to say the mantra, obviously Krishna hears it, and he says, this person is very sincerely chanting and hearing my words coming from the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and chanting my holy names. Therefore, I will personally protect this devotee, and I will also reveal knowledge to this devotee from the heart. Tesam satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. Krishna says in the 10th chapter, 10th verse, that those who serve me with love and devotion, always thinking of me and always engaged in my service, I give them the knowledge by which they come to me. So this is very significant. And therefore, it says that thus we should be satisfied with those things he has kindly set aside for us, and we should always consider to whom those things we possess actually belong. So everything that in this world belongs to Krishna, and everything should be used in his service. And to know how to do that, we should come to class on a regular basis and learn from genuine sadhus how to use everything in the material world in the service of Krishna. Take, for example, our dwelling, which is made of earth, wood, stone, iron, cement, and so many other material things. If we think in terms of Sri Ishopanishad, we must know that we cannot produce any of these building materials ourselves. We can simply bring them together and transform them into different shapes by our labor. A laborer cannot claim to be a proprietor of a thing just because he has worked hard to manufacture it. So, if you work for someone, then that person is definitely paying you a salary, but the expectation is that you will produce work that by which the owner will make more money than your salary, and therefore he'll be able to pay your salary and still make a profit for himself or herself. So in the same way, here it's saying that we must know that we cannot produce any of these building materials ourselves. We can simply bring them together and transform them into different shapes by our labor. So the earth, the water, the fire, the air, the ether, or space, mind, intelligence, ego, all these things have been created by Krishna, not by us. Otherwise, we'd be able to remember it. So they're given to us for a certain purpose. What is that purpose? Well, the purpose is giving us a chance to use all these things in the service of Krishna so that we can then acquire transcendental knowledge, given again by Krishna, by which we can make the right decisions in this life and go back to Godhead at the end of life. That's the whole program. And the material world is actually a prison house. The warden of the prison house is Durga Mata, and she satisfies the material desires of people, and then she takes them back, basically ruins people, all their material opulence, to teach them a lesson that they don't actually belong in this world. So even the greatest emperor or dictator or president, they're all going to fail. All living entities are eventually going to fail materially by old age, disease, and death. No matter how rich you are, no matter how prominent you are, no matter how much power you have or prestige, eventually we will all be defeated by the old age, disease, and death. That's a lesson. The lesson is that we should not waste our time trying to compete with God, trying to usurp all the amenities that we have in this material world for our own selfish purpose, but we should use everything in the service of God and to please Him. So there's a difference between karma and bhakti. Karma is actions, but usually with the desire to enjoy the fruits of the actions. And bhakti is offering the fruits of all our actions with love and devotion to Krishna. So there's a major difference there. Now, if we offer everything to Krishna, someone might say, well, what will remain for me? Well, no, Krishna is not let's say, disgenuous person. Just like we offer every day food to Krishna, and he offers it back as his prasadam. So Krishna is not an ungrateful person. He recognizes the service of his devotee, he protects the devotee, gives knowledge to the devotee, and gives prasadam to the devotee. So when we become a devotee, that intimate relationship with Krishna is the best guarantee of success in this life. And what is success? Success is not dying and taking birth again in the material world with another material body. Success is at the moment of death perfectly remembering Krishna, and that's why Ishopanishad is so important. The 17th Mantra of Ishopanishad, Vayur Anilam Amritam Atedam Basmantam Sariram Om Kratos Smara Kritam Smara Kratos Smara Kritam Smara. It says, and this is the mantra that one should say when they're close to death. It says, let this temporary body be burnt to ashes, and let the air of life be merged with the totality of air. Now, O my Lord, please remember all my sacrifices, and because you are the ultimate beneficiary, please remember all that I have done for you. So if we've done nothing for Krishna in this lifetime, there's nothing for Krishna to remember, and we're in a very, very precarious position at that point, and there's no guarantee that we'll have a human body in the next life. We'll have to go back into the whole evolutionary process of 8,400,000 species. Shishirada Nilamadava Kije. So you see, there's so much information in this little book. We'll stop right there, continue tomorrow. Are there any questions? Yes. Yes.
So I do name chanting in the morning.
Yes.
And then I do in the evening and before going to bed.
Yes.
But like after one or two mala, my mind goes here and there. So what, like how to focus?
Well, it's very easy. Chant loudly. Then you're forced to focus. If you chant silently, it's a very good chance that your mind will wander. If you chant loudly, well, of course, it depends what your situation is, right? If there are other people in the house and you're chanting loudly, they might protest, right? But if you chant loudly, or actually there's another thing you can do. Chanting loudly would definitely stop the mind from wandering. But there's another thing you can do. You can chant the other mantra, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasti Gaura Bhakta Vindam. This is the Chaitanya mantra, in which it purifies the mind of those type of wandering thoughts. Now, so does the Hare Krishna mantra, but sometimes by repeated chanting, your mind starts wandering. So if you switch to Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vindam, Lord Chaitanya's mercy will come on you, and then you go back to chanting Hare Krishna. Okay? So that's another way. Or you chant out loud, and then your mind is forced to follow at that point, because you're making, let's say, a exerted effort to chant out loud. Right? Even when you chant, it should be loud enough that you can hear it, so that there's a closed circuit between the lips and the ears. So you're hearing, If you chant silently, you can. You can chant silently. You can chant loudly. You can chant softly. There's no fixed rule how to chant the holy names of the Lord. But if you chant loudly, your mind is forced to follow. If you chant enough that you can hear it, or if someone's next to you, you can hear it, that is ideal for, not disturbing anyone, right? If you chant silently, you can do that also, but you have a tendency of the mind wandering at that point. Okay? Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Haribol.
Prabhuji, you said like Kam, Krodh, Lobh,
Yes.
Moha, Man, Matsar. So, by default, we have this Moha to our body and all, like Sharir or body, Moh to our body, or
Identifying with the body.
identifying, and like
Yeah.
any pain or something happens, like we feel it's happening to me.
Yes.
And same way, like our mind is not that uh, like detached or something. You still think
Yeah, you're thinking of so many things.
yeah, and the other thing is like our mind also is not very purified. It's still some
Yes.
it's like it's
Yes.
little bit of pakhand or something, which we call it. So how to, like, this moha and other things, how it changes and how it happens?
Well, let's say your body is dirty, right? So you go to the Safeway or one of these stores and you buy soap. You come back home, you wet the soap, you wet your body, and you apply the soap, and then you rinse it, and the dirt goes away. So now let's say your mind is dirty. Now obviously they're not selling any soap for the mind in the store. The soap for the mind is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And also hearing Bhagavad Gita spoken by genuine devotees. And asking questions also, right? So if you chant sincerely, all those nasty thoughts will eventually go away. And if you hear reverently and participate in a class by asking questions and hearing on a regular basis, that means every day. That means you have to be regulated, you understand? And the best time to hear is early in the morning. So every morning we have a class at 6:15. So in order to come to the class, you have to take rest early. There's none of this staying up late after 10 o'clock at night. It's very bad for spiritual life. You have to learn to eat your last meal at 6 o'clock. And then when you take rest at 9 or 9:30 or 10, all the food is digested. So you get genuine rest, and you can wake up 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. 6 hours should be enough if you're regulated, right? If you have regulated eating, then you can regulate your sleeping. Then you won't sleep more than 6 hours, and sometimes even less, right, without being tired. Then you have plenty of time because you're waking up in the Brahma Muhurta, at least 3 hours before sunrise. And that's the best time to make spiritual advancement, to chant, to come to Mangalarati, to hear the class, and so forth. And then you're ready to go to and into the world and work and do whatever you have to do to maintain yourself. And then if this becomes your regular habit, then all those thoughts begin to go away. But if you spend time on the cell phone, on the internet, watching movies, television, reading all these different books, newspapers, listening to the news, all that. So all this imagery of bad things enters into the mind, and bad thoughts and bad desires develop. And therefore your mind goes out of control. It becomes full of dirt, basically. So everything is planned in the material world today to contaminate the mind. And therefore, people become lusty. When the lust is frustrated, they become angry. When there's anger, they become delusioned, and then they lose their memory. Their memory becomes corrupted, and then their intelligence gets lost, and they make all kinds of crazy decisions in their life, and getting angry with people, and developing hatred or envy. You see, it's a very bad downward spiral, and it's all going on in the mind. So it's very important to keep the mind pure, and that is by hearing uplifting things such as the Bhagavad Gita, hearing, and then engaging in uplifting activities, which is like seva, right? And associating with uplifting people, genuine sadhus. And then you'll see the mind comes under control. It's going to fight. So it's very difficult to bring the mind under control. It's, in fact, in the 6th chapter, what does Krishna say about the mind? He says, Arjuna also says to Krishna, he says, it seems to me it's more difficult to conquer to control the mind than to control the wind. Oh, that's a fact. But Krishna doesn't say that there's no hope. So let me read to you what Arjuna says and what Krishna says. 1 second. Arjuna says, first of all, he says, O Madhusudana, Krishna, the system of yoga you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. All right? That's what Krishna says. That's what Arjuna says. And it's a fact. And then he says, Chanchalam hi manak Krishna pramati balavad dridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayur eva suduskaram. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. Now, what does Krishna say? Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Asamsayam Mahabaho, Mano Durnigraham Chalam, Abhyasena Tukonteya Vairagyena Chagriyate. He says, Lord Shri Krishna said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, Arjuna, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. Suitable practice. So what is that suitable practice? It's lifestyle adjustment, number one. Going to sleep early, waking up early. Very important. And waking up 3 hours before sunrise. That's very important if you want to make spiritual advancement. So let's see what Prabhupada says in the purport. He says, the difficulty of controlling the obstinate mind is, as expressed by Arjuna, is accepted by the personality of Godhead. Krishna acknowledges that it's very difficult to control the mind. But at the same time, he suggests that by practice and detachment, it is possible. So practice means following the rules and regulations. No meat eating, no gambling or speculation, no illicit sex, no intoxication, including coffee and tea. Always chanting minimum 16 rounds on beads every day, 108 beads. That means you're chanting 1,750 names of Krishna, 16 rounds. And also eating only prasadam. And also engaging, hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam every day, spoken by genuine devotees. And also coming to the temple and performing seva, as well as hearing the classes. Nowadays you can hear the class on the internet. This class is being televised on the internet right now, or you have Zoom classes also, right, from the temple. So if you avoid those 4 things that are called yamas, negative things, and do those 4 positive things on a daily basis, gradually your mind becomes purified. And you become fixed in the path of Sanatan Dharma. See, Dharma means you will do things in life like helping other people, helping your family, helping strangers even. So it's service. Sanatan Dharma is serving Krishna, serving Radha and Krishna. Dharma is the natural, let's say, quality of a human being. Everybody is serving something or someone. If you have no one to serve, you buy a dog and serve the dog. You see, so you can't. No one can stop serving because it's the dharma of everyone. But when you decide to serve Krishna, that becomes Sanatan Dharma. Your eternal service. The service we do now is temporary, but the service to Krishna is eternal. And that's explained in the Bhagavad Gita also in the 2nd chapter, which says, Nahabhikramaнаstusti pratijayana vidyate swalpam apyasya dharmasya chayate mahado payat. This is Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, 40th verse. In this endeavor, meaning in devotional service, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on the path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. That means whatever you do for Krishna, which means whatever service you perform for Krishna, the result of that stays with you eternally. So let's say you only spend 1% of your life, in this birth, in service for Krishna. The next birth you get, if it's a human birth, you begin from 2%. You don't start from 0. Because whatever you've done for Krishna, it stays with you eternally. So that's a benefit. There are other benefits also in Kali Yuga. We'll talk about that another time. So, therefore, you want to purify the mind, then you have to associate with genuine sadhus. Give up the association with asadhus, with people who are engaged in sense gratification all the time. Now you might say, well, I have to go to work and everybody there is doing this and doing that. Yeah, but you don't closely associate with them. Of course, you have a professional relationship with those people, and you perform your service, but your main preoccupation is associating with genuine devotees and hearing regularly and engaging in the festivals, engaging in the arti and the kirtan and the pravachan. See, this is the real life. Because every day you're going to learn more and more about how to control the mind, how to control the senses, how to speak nicely, how to think properly, and how to help others do the same thing. Okay? Yeah. Hare Krishna. Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Every night we have class. Hare Krishna.